Hi everyone, thanks very much for your patience. We'll get started now. So as I said before, welcome to this live webinar of 3D Repo for custom integrations. I'm Andrew Norrie, I'm the Commercial Director at 3D Repo, and I'll be guiding you through today's presentation. Let's have a quick look at the agenda. So I'll be starting off with an introduction to 3D Repo, just for people who might be new to the platform, just explaining a bit about what we do and why. I'll then be handing over to our Customer Success Manager, Bogdan Davydov, who'll be looking at the background of APIs, why we use them and what they're for. And then we've got our guest speaker today, who's Rob Clifton from Asite. He's the Senior Vice President for UK and Europe. And he'll be talking about 3D Repo's custom integration with Asite and how we've been working together in a partnership. And then finally, we'll have Matt Osment, our Head of Digital Twins, looking at a live demonstration of how you can integrate two platforms together in Power Automate and 3D Repo. We're going to do a bit of a different format to what we normally do this time, where we're going to have an open Q&A session after each presentation, so a very quick discussion, and we encourage you to get involved in that. So there is a Q&A panel within the live Teams event, so please do keep the questions coming in as they go. If you could, just make a note in it as who the question is directed at, that would be really helpful. And we'll go through those. This presentation is being recorded and will be made available to all attendees afterwards, so do feel free to share it around and show your colleagues. So let's carry on with this presentation. So an introduction to 3D Repo. So as a platform, 3D Repo ingests 3D models from various sources, whether they be uploaded directly to the platform or via the API as we talk about today. On top of this platform, we've built a product called 3D Repo IO, which is a web-based viewer for viewing and collaborating on models in the cloud with multiple parties, with various tools such as clash detection, change detection, risk management and data validation. But then more importantly, if we just keep going through this slide, you'll see that underneath that and what it's all built on top of is an open standard API, which has an ever-growing list of products that we're integrated with that can either help us push or pull data to or from the platform. And this is really where we're going to be concentrating the presentation today. We can move on from there. So in terms of integrations, we've done a number of them in-house using this API. So integrations and plugins with Autodesk native tools like Revit and Navisworks. We've also built custom applications on top of the platform, such as PlanBase, which is a planning tool that was developed in conjunction with the Mayor of London's office for allowing residents to come in and give feedback on schemes back to the planners, as well as integrations with other tools such as Power BI, Node-RED and Dynamo. But the really interesting part for us is when we get involved with other people using our API. So our partnerships, as the one we're going to be talking about today, is mainly with Asite, but we've also done them with things like Mission Room for multi-screen VR. We've had people build custom AR apps for iPad on top of the platform, custom digital twin applications in the web, so connecting to our API and using it, but with a completely custom user interface for their particular use case. And also with data collection with tools such as EviFile, bringing information back from site into the 3D model. Move on from there. So this is what the platform looks like once you come into it in the web browser. So we're combining models, GIS data, all into one web-based platform. So everyone logs on to that single source of truth and can come in, collaborate, mark up, manage issues, run clash detections, all the sort of thing you'd expect. So that's my really quick introduction to the platform as a whole. At 3D Repo IO, this tool that we're showing now is free to sign up for, so I encourage anyone that wants to learn more about that to do that. But for now, we'll be carrying on with Bogdan looking at the API in general.
Thank you, Andrew. It was a really nice presentation. Quick and brief. Okay, cool. You see my screen well? Yep. Amazing. Cool. Hi, everyone. Thanks for dialing to today's webinar. Today in particular, we'll be looking at some cool presentations by Rob about Asite and integration with 3D Repo, and then Matthew will show you some really cool things you can do with APIs in 3D Repo. But before we jump into that, let's just touch bases on what exactly is an API, right? Not many of you might know what it is, so let me just simplify for you, and then in the next 5 minutes, I'll explain you the concept so that everything that the guys are going to talk about later will make a lot more sense to you. So when we talk about APIs, first of all, let's maybe talk about connectivity, right? So right now, connectivity is a really cool thing. You know, we have it at our fingertips and we can communicate with anyone, anywhere, anytime, right? You know, when it comes to connectivity, we can do it on laptops, phones, and we can do anything we want. We can purchase things, we can post things, we can message individuals, we can pretty much pick anything we want, wherever, whenever we want. How does it happen though? How do we get connected? How do we get our data from, let's say, here to there? And how do we connect it to other applications and maybe across other devices? Well, you know, and in that process, how do we also, let's say, make dinner reservations, place an order, or book our next holiday? How do all of these things happen? And they seem to be so quick and easy. Well, the unsung hero behind it is application programming interface, or simply known as an API. It is the engine that makes all of these things happen, that allows us to connect across multiple applications and devices. And for instance, if we look for a definition of API, what is an API? It goes like this: an application programming interface, computing interface, and I'm not even going to read it all, right? You're going to lose track halfway down it. So let's put it in a simple concept that perhaps would make a lot more sense. We have two systems and we want to connect them together. So an API is a messenger that sends your request to another system, and in turn, you retrieve a response to your request from that system. If we put it into, let's say, a familiar scenario for you, that would make a bit more sense. Let's take a look at something like, let's say, a restaurant. Perhaps you grab a table somewhere and you're given a menu. You're looking through the menu and you make your choice, you know exactly what drink you want to order. But how do you get connected between your request and the system that's going to deliver you the response? Then in this case, it's the bar. Perhaps you put your hand up and you call for the waiter. And waiter is the messenger who then takes your request and then sends it over to the system, in this case, the bar, and in turn sends you back the response to your request, which was a couple of drinks. And it's using APIs we can, you know, post requests, retrieve information, or maybe tweak things. If, for instance, you don't want to drink with an ice or want a different drink, right? You can use API to tweak that information. If we put it into a real world, right? How does it actually work in real world? We now understand the concept. It's all about sending a messenger across from one system to another. Let's have a look at perhaps hotel booking, something that all of us are familiar with. We log into a hotel website, and from there we start choosing the destination, the number of guests, the rooms that we would like to get when we're checking in and checking out. So we're filling in a few variables that are then going to be used as our request. Now, the website has a direct access to the database of that hotel. And when you fill out your variables, you get connection to that database, and then you send your request to that database. If the data request gets a match to your variables, in turn, what you get as a response is a price match. So then you know it is available and this is how much it's going to cost. Okay, this is great. This is really easy to do, perhaps for, let's say, hotels that are running their own websites. How does it happen across, let's say, multiple applications or multiple devices? It's quite simple. Let's stick to the same original scenario of hotel booking. Let's say we open up our web browser, but instead of going directly to the actual hotel website, you're going to an aggregator, like in this case, bookinghotel.com, that generates results and aggregates information from multiple hotel providers. Right? So the website has exactly the same input form that you might find on many other hotel websites. But in this case, it actually has access to all of those different hotels that have their own databases and availability information. Now, you establish that connection. You provide exactly the same information. In this case, we want to go to New York for 4 guests, and those are the dates in March. But how do we connect to those databases across multiple hotels? We use their APIs. It's something that allows us to connect directly to their database. We send our actual request, it gets processed, and then we retrieve the response. In this case, it's the list of the hotels and their availability. So quite simply, API allows you to bridge the gap between multiple applications, or let's say software devices, laptops or phones, and connect us all together across the globe. So if you find a new connection somewhere on another device, you can connect still together using things like APIs. That's pretty much it. And that's as simple as that. I'm not going to go any deeper because I don't want to, guys, complicate it for you.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, Bogdan. If anyone has any questions, please do post them in. We've got a few come through that we'll go through now, but any questions for Bogdan, keep them coming. So the first question is, Bogdan, what's a web API then?
Yeah, good question. A web API, it's an API that can be accessed using the HTTP protocol. So essentially, API defines endpoints for valid requests and response formats. Web APIs they use to communicate, in browsers across multiple applications, and that's something that actually allows you to get access to platforms like 3D Repo, where you can use a hypertext link in your web browser.
Okay, are there other protocols that people could use?
Yeah, there are it's varied, there are REST APIs, there are JSON XML, SOAP, simple object access protocols, but they all have to follow their own different schemas in the sense of how you put your request and how you get your response, and different tiers of security. So it's a bit more technical. Maybe we can discuss it later if you have any questions.
Okay. So someone else was asking, how can they test these? Is there a way that people can test them?
Yeah, quite frankly, there are loads of applications, whether they're web-based or desktop-based, to name a few. Let's say maybe Postman, right? Don't know if you guys heard about it. You can use that to maybe check your APIs for some web service. Essentially, you put your API request and it just shows you what the response. So before you start building your application, you can quickly test if it works and if you get the response you want. If you're using desktop applications, another example within the industry would be, let's say, something like Dynamo, right? It gets a direct interaction with Revit APIs. So if Revit doesn't have specific buttons, you can maybe prototype things in Dynamo to see if the API performs how you expect it. So that's exactly how it works for applications also.
Okay. And we've got quite an interesting question here as well that I guess comes up a lot in conversations I have with people where they're trying to understand APIs, is that who actually creates them?
Well, essentially, APIs are created pretty much by the software vendor, I guess, right? Whoever writes the application. But that doesn't mean that if you are building an application, you can create an API, right? So for instance, if you look at 3drepo.io as a product, we actually rely on those APIs. Everything that you see on 3drepo.io, it's built from an API. We just simply query all the functions and API calls to retrieve data from the database, which allows us to add more functionality without spending too much time creating this complicated software. So you can always, directly communicate to individuals that create these software packages. And obviously, in the world of internet, there's a lot of API documentation floating about for whatever application you're using. So you can always read through that information as well if you're looking to maybe potentially creating a new API that doesn't exist in the docs. You can get in touch with the individual that helps create the software package in the first place.
Yeah, I think just to add to that from my point of view, the difference that I've seen with working with 3D Repo or for 3D Repo is that difference between a product that is built on a set of APIs where it's API first and a product where a product's been built and then retrospectively an API has been released for it. It makes a hell of a difference to the functionality and reliability of those APIs because that developers are using them every day for developing their own platform as well, not just as a kind of window into what they do for other people.
Exactly.
Okay, brilliant. All right, I think that's it then for questions there. If anyone does have any more questions for Bogdan, just keep them coming in as well, and we can answer them at the end when we'll have a bit of a longer conversation. For now, we'll pass over to Rob, from Asite to give us his presentation.
Sure, thanks Andrew. Morning everybody. Right, let me just show my screen here and get fired up. So I suppose I better start off as the guest to this webinar, just giving a bit of background to Asite. I wouldn't be doing my job otherwise. Asite is a project portfolio management tool primarily. You know, I suppose the bread and butter of what we do is a common data environment for projects globally. We have a big base, obviously, from the UK. Many of you will be familiar with the kind of projects that that Asite is on. So, you know, we're used on Hinkley Point C nuclear power station, for example. We're used on all the station upgrades or developments for Crossrail. Engage with HS2, lots of the buildings at Canary Wharf. Extensive use, basically, of the Asite platform. And where we kind of sit, just going basically into the products here, is we sit primarily doing the project portfolio management and delivering a CD to house data, if you like, for these projects. Now, diving into the platform, and again, just giving you a kind of glimpse of what we do, there's lots of sub-products within that overall product family, the project portfolio management. And as I said, I suppose we're primarily in the business of holding data. Now, around that data, lots of actions and tasks are performed either within the system, or most importantly, as per this whole webinar and the purpose you're listening, you know, providing that data to external systems for specific uses. Now, when we talk about Asite here, this is kind of the dashboard view. If I dive down what we're focusing on today into specific file information, so i.e. documents, whether it be files or models, will be detailed, you know, and stored within this listing here. So the data, I must admit, working from home, the internet isn't as strong as I would like it to be today. So within here, within this listing here, we have all of the documentation against specific projects. Now, those familiar with Asite will be very familiar with this screen where the information is stored with a large amount of metadata around it. Now, what I'm interested in talking about is, you know, how we move this data from one system to another, what that looks like, and what's the reason for doing that. So within one of these projects, for example, I will have information within here, such as an area that models are specifically loaded into. I should state, you know, I've set this up just for clarity. Many of you will be more familiar with simply loading files into a singular folder with metadata tagging in alignment with that. But let's say Asite represents the CD for a project, and therefore data is delivered into Asite as we would expect on a required basis by each of the supply chain. And that will be, you know, familiar to lots of you, hopefully working on projects, but familiar generally to the idea and the concept that you've got to deliver information into one place for your project data. Now, within Asite, there's a number of tools. And against this, what we're focusing on is the way that Asite is able to deliver the files very, very easily to tools such as 3D Repo. So within here, we have workflows operational on any number of files. And you can see there's lots of files that have different workflows running. Now, the key way that this integration is set up to work, and I'm obviously drilling down into the specifics here, is that any file that is uploaded into Asite, for example, or a revision that's loaded into Asite can automatically be pushed to appear within your 3D Repo workspace, essentially in here. So I have my model data and some revisions of models I've got set up here. Obviously, you know, I'll let the guys talk about all the functionality within here to that extent. But the primary thing we want to just show, for the sake of showing, you know, the file moving from one to the other, is how a file moves across. Many of you will be more familiar with the old download upload technique. You take one file out of one system and you put it into another system. It's inefficient, it takes time, it's laborious, it's the past way of doing things. What we're talking about now, what we're focusing on now, is that when I execute something in Asite, it basically triggers that file to be delivered into 3D Repo, and that comes from these workflows that we've got operational here. So workflows are basically a number of tasks that follow after one another or happen in parallel based on a specific task, such as the upload of a file. So if we look at a workflow example here, there's lots going on in this workflow. It's an ISO compliant workflow, but it moves through different stages based on its requirement in alignment with ISO 19650, for example. And we can see one of these stops in the workflow is to push this model file to 3D Repo. So just to stress the importance of what I'm showing here, what we're saying is that this little workflow system task, as it's referred to in Asite, can be dropped into a process that needs to be followed as part of your CDE, i.e. the delivery team lead may need to check this for acceptance into a shared area, but then once in the shared area, you are going to execute specific tasks within 3D Repo on that model, on that singular, whether it be a singular file or federated file. So we automatically deliver it there. Now, rather than me run through a whole workflow as an example of that, I've set up just a shortened version of this, if you like, which contains just the requirement to push the model file. Now, again, those familiar with Asite will know, but for the education of all others, the trigger for this could be anything such as upload or I status change a file or something like that to set this workflow off. So I've completed it once, but let's just go through it again just to show you how it works. So we can see we have the mechanical file sat in here. I updated at 9:23, testing diligently before we had this webinar. And if I just set this off again by editing the status of this file, i.e. let's say it wasn't approved at this point, and I'm now saying, okay, we're moving this file to approved as shared. I could put a reason there, whether it be pushed to 3D Repo or whatever. But as soon as I save this, and all being well, but Sod's Law as live demos always go, this will trigger a workflow that is running, and we can see this now. And what that is doing is it's executing an API as described by Bogdan earlier on that will see in a second the refreshing of this mechanical file so that we have a revision of this within 3D Repo. So we'll come back to it in a second, but you will see once that's executed, this will begin queuing for basically import into 3D Repo and use as you require there. So it's as simple as literally having a workflow set up either by yourselves within Asite or by contact our Asite consultancy team, and we will be able to handle this and execute this or set this up for you if you like. But if you're interested in doing it yourself, it's in our workflow tools area here, and you can go into workflows, and there's a system task here that you can set up to drop into your workflows as you require, which is this push model file to 3D Repo. So if you have any questions on that, just let us know. Obviously, there's a little bit of setup and config there, but once operational, you can then drop it into your workflows wherever you require, and it will deliver those files into 3D Repo largely immediately. And we can see now we have that revision of the file is now being pushed into 3D Repo without me actually needing to do anything at all beyond what I would passively be doing anyway, which is the important point there. Now, in terms of this integration, obviously we're at release stage in terms of pushing this file and also receiving the file back. So that will be set up within there. But this is going to be built into a larger item as we move forward, and there'll be more features added to this in terms of kind of the issues and queries coming back potentially from 3D Repo to be stored against the files in Asite. And beyond that, I suppose it's really what both our client bases are looking for and interested in. Now, I want to also explain this in kind of a conceptual idea, if you like. So actually, what's the methodology of Asite and why is it becoming prominent now? Why are we seeing more of this integration idea and concept more recently? So let's have as I say, let's just take it conceptually for a minute and about what we were doing in the past from a software perspective and what the kind of present / future really looks like for this. Now, if you take the past approach to softwares, if you like, software is always built up around a unique selling point. That's what it begins with. The smallest startups start with something that is unique, that to get their footing in the market, they come up with something that has no competition, if you like, so that they are the only ones doing it. It allows them a foothold. As that product develops, they will build core functionality that basically expands upon that USP, but it is functionality that has more crossover with competitors, let's say, and obviously the larger the product gets, the more crossover you get, to the point where you have an outer ring, if you like, of wider functionality. Now, this is very true of Asite also, but generally across the software industry over the years since its .com boom, if you like, of how software is developed. You had a central point, and what you would do is you would start with features around that central point. So let's say the CDE for Asite, for example, and you build up things like workflows that were core and also primarily had little competition in terms of their capability within that. And then you developed and you developed and you developed to bigger, broader products. And I'll be cautious of mentioning any specific names, but you would understand the large, really large software companies that start kind of building out and out and out to actually then develop features that are not core to their product line, but they're required by their customer base. So you end up with this kind of mix of features here, spreading further and further from the USP, and these features on the outer kind of wider functionality get less focus, and as a result you don't get the same array of functionality within those features, if you like. So let's just build this all the way out. Now, consider it in this sense. You've got as a market requirement in terms of what you want to be able to execute, in terms of the things you as a business, let's say, whether it be a design consultancy or a contractor or a client asset owner, you want to be able to do. And you require this amount from the market. So we have this square area. Now we can see if we had one singular product trying to cover this area, it's very, very difficult to cover it in any depth. So the core area where we've got the core functionality and particularly the USP is well covered, but that only represents a small portion of what the overall market requirements are for any software to be able to execute. Now let's look at what the aim is for the present and the future, and why integrations are important. Essentially what I'm leading on to here. Now let's say that software's just started to focus on actually their core functionality and their USPs, the stuff basically they're really good at. Now, if they focus on that and reduce their features down, you get more depth. And then what you're able to do is there's less coverage of the market area, obviously, at that space, but then you end up with more and more specialist softwares covering different areas of the market, but at much greater depth. So, for example, and taking a specific webinar on today, 3D Repo can cover the BIM area, and again, I'm going to let these guys explain it in more detail themselves, but they'll be able to cover functionality around the model that Asite will not cover. Essentially, things like as of now, the GIS integration, the health and safety items, and the clash detection within the web browser, that kind of stuff is a perfect example of specialist areas within given softwares. And what you end up with is a number of softwares covering different areas such as this. So you have core functionality covering the market at much greater depth than one software company or a number of larger software companies trying to produce wider functionality. Now, what's the challenge with this and why has it existed? Well, historically, we always had or have always considered platforms that try to do everything because the platforms are connected. Take the big tech giants, take somebody like Microsoft. They produce the software that your original storage of information is going to come on, and then they produce things like Microsoft Word. I'm producing this on PowerPoint, and then they add more and more functionality because it's all connected and it all works together very effectively. Now, the challenge is once you get into newer softwares, newer areas of technology, and where technology is moving faster, what becomes more important is actually connecting the different softwares as effectively as one platform is connected. And that's where these seamless integrations by connectors or by APIs become increasingly important. And the benefit of this, as I said, is you get much better coverage of your requirements as a market, but you also are able to set up and approach the solution that you require in a much more personalized way. So let's say me as a user, I want to, I'm doing heavily into items around the reporting, but I also need a lot of model checking. I would need a central repository for data. I maybe have Asite storing the data. I'm using Power BI to run reporting off, and I have 3D Repo to do some, advanced modeling items. So I have that set up. But another user, a finance company, let's say, aren't interested in that approach. So they might want a finance system built onto the site. So they set up and have the integrations working in their way. Now, if you have one product or one selected product for that business, you cannot produce as effective a solution as being able to build up integrations as you require to provide something that's really bespoke for you. And that's what we want. Take the most common kind of approach to or theory of this. If you take your phone, your iPhone or Android phone out your pocket, you're offered a platform onto which you can basically build in the parts that you want to use. Everyone has a different selection of apps built in. and you work with them in a connected way for the most part. Now, it's not directly APIs or connected, but the principle is the same. You still need to be able to have specialist areas, specialist tools to be able to do the specialist things you want to be able to do. But what we want to offer you as the technology industry, if you like, is something that is much more specific and bespoke to the way that you would like to work. And from an Asite perspective, we're building this out, similar API slide to what Andrew showed before. There's obviously lots of companies on here. We've recently obviously added 3D Repo, but also Zoom and Microsoft Teams from all the working from home. And this is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's important that you're looking, when you're selecting softwares to do this stuff, that are part of this network, if you like. Softwares that sit out on their own and integrate poorly do not offer you the same potential and capacity going forwards, and are not as future-proof as those that are really connected into this web of softwares that will able to offer you really effective solutions to what you want to be able to do. So I appreciate I was kind of very theoretical in terms of approaching that, but hopefully the original demonstration of how a file moving across explains how that kind of is executed. And yeah, I welcome any questions that you have on that kind of concept, or specifically onto the the Asite tool with regards to that integration.
Brilliant. That's great, Rob. Thanks for that. So the first one here for you, Rob, is why is there more focus on integrations now compared to before?
Okay, so I mean, there's a couple of things. I think what you're finding now, and you'll see this even with the big tech providers, is a real move to doing more and more in the cloud. So your data is stored in the cloud, and a lot of your tools, and an increasing number of tools, are now existing in the cloud. If you go back, let's say 10 years ago, and you try to execute all the tasks you wanted to do on a day-to-day basis in the cloud, it was very, very difficult. For anyone that had an early stage Chromebook, you will know what I'm talking about. It's very, very hard to do this. Now what you're seeing, which personally I think is fantastic, you have an increasing number of tools that exist within the cloud, and that means that I've got a little bit of echo from someone just and what you're then seeing is that you are able to connect things more effectively, and because you're able to connect things more effectively and more easily than you are before, you're seeing an increase in this kind of drive to have more integration. So I think yeah, for me, that's what I look at as a big driver. I think it's going to continue going on. If you look at Microsoft's push with 365 and with Teams, everything is, opening, and they're encouraging you to open in browser. So I think that's the big driver that you'll see here, rather than working in much more siloed approach on my desktop, and I'm having to send files here, and it becomes very heavy and labor intensive to try and connect systems. By more and more systems being in the cloud, it becomes increasingly easy to execute these kind of integrations, and I think you'll see it becoming more and more popular as people realize the ease and the effectiveness you can get out of this kind of approach.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a couple more here around can we push models to 3D Repo ourselves, or do we need like a consultant to come in and help?
So you can set it up yourself. So there was a guide on the Asite website from an Asite side on how you can set up the push from Asite. By all means, if you wanted to reach out to a consultant, of course. There's a reference there to a digital engineering consultant, but yeah, you can set it up yourself. It's not specifically out the box, if you like, in the sense that you will need to create the system task to drop it into your workflow, but it's easy enough that within 5-10 minutes you can have the system task set up, and then it's just a matter of dropping it into your workflow. So as is the intention with most of Asite, it can be self-service basically, but of course we're on hand if anyone should need any assistance.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to do it as well, right? We never know how people are going to want these things to work and how they're going to want their own information to flow. So having something completely out of the box is never going to be probably the right solution for this type of thing.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, without stepping on what Matt's probably going to cover now, obviously we want it to be easy for people. That's the primary thing. I mean, I always say to my development team, if I can't do it, then it's not easy enough. I'm not a technological person. I'm a civil engineer. So if I can't set it up, then the hope that our user base will be able to do it is lost. So it's a big drive, and I think again it's important for industry from a technology side to understand that that's going to be really important.
Yeah, and so this one's just come in. What other integrations or advancements between this 3D Repo and Asite thing can we expect to see in the future?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I suppose I'll spin it back to you a bit, Andrew, to be honest. It's really what the clients want and what your user base are looking to get out of 3D Repo, and then what data they want in Asite. I always pull up a slide normally with plugs and sockets and saying, okay, well, what data do you want flowing into which socket and why? And that's the important thing, why. We don't just want to have an integration of data flowing to show it in two places. Sometimes we do, but we want it going for a purpose. So in terms of an Asite 3D Repo, I suppose, being able to handle the issues back potentially would be key. Through whether it be through BCF or the tracking against the task within Asite. From our side, obviously there'll be increased number of features in 3D Repo as well that may require or have better connection, whether it be into the tendering module within Asite, for example. Could be a big win. I suppose it's basically what I'm saying is it's client led really. I don't know if you had input into that, Andrew.
Yeah, so I think from our point of view, it's very client-led, and I think what Matt will show now is that it's possible for you guys to take this and run with it a bit further with using the APIs beyond what we release as two companies together. But some of the stuff I'm really interested in looking in is around automation of what we do with the data once we receive it from Asite. So using things like our smart groups feature to be able to automatically check that file as soon as it hits the 3D Repo servers without anyone having to even do anything, and being able to have that kind of automated data validation of the information that's coming into your common data environment, I think could be really powerful. But yeah, Matt will show more about what you can do with setting up additional features outside of this once you've got the data coming into 3D Repo.
And I think, just to interrupt there, the other thing that's important to know is because Asite have made it so easy. You saw those integrations that Rob was showing, that little flow chart, that as soon as a customer asks for it, it's not a 3-month project to get it underway. It can be as quick as a month, a week, if the connector's already there, a day, as Rob said before. So it's really, people start asking us questions and we'll give them answers, basically.
Yeah. So there's an interesting one here actually, Rob, about how does Asite compare as a CDE data storage to something like ProjectWise and BIM 360? Where obviously BIM 360 allows model storage, and it's kind of what we're saying here, I guess, combined a bit. So I think this is what we've spoken about a bit in your presentation, right? The advantage of having that kind of separate, as opposed to having this all-encompassing beast from one vendor. The advantage of having multiple vendors in your technology stack, I guess.
Yeah, totally. I mean, again, I suppose I've got to be a bit cautious. I think the BIM 360 is a good tool, but it doesn't have the workflow power and the compliance to ISO 19650 at the level that Asite can provide as a bottom line. That would be my primary thing. And I think from the modeling side, I don't think it also, again, I'm speaking a bit for you, Andrew, but I wouldn't say it has the functionality and capability that 3D Repo has from a modeling side. So you combine Asite and 3D Repo together and you have something that's hugely more powerful on both sides, because from BIM 360 is trying to cover both areas, which I appreciate it's not a status product. They have, have big reach and big range in terms of their functionality, but it falls slightly outside that core functionality, if you like, in the sense that there isn't that power of the workflows and the flexibility to do that, because they're trying to keep everything as much as possible in-house. And by having two systems integrated that specialize in those different areas, for me, it provides a much better solution for you as a client, basically. With regards to ProjectWise, again, very good tool, and they're obviously in the process of pushing that more cloud-based. It's obviously come from an on-premise kind of approach, and there'll be, again, similar kind of challenges there. I think ProjectWise is fantastic in that WIP environment, but we tend to see more preference as in terms of taking Asite when you're moving from kind of the shared published environment, because again, the flexibility and ease of distribution, sharing files, and then, as I said, these wide integrations. So yeah, I mean, if you want to reach out, I'll happily, that question's come through anonymously, but if you wanted to reach out, I will happily kind of go through those in detail.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I'd just add to that is that the staying within that one vendor solution thing, no matter what that vendor is, tends to mean that you're going to be working in proprietary file types with proprietary file formats, and you're getting that kind of data lock-in problem, right? Where this data is available now, how available is it in 10 years' time? How do you get into it? Are you having to do constant upgrades of versions and that sort of thing? Whereas working in this multi-vendor solution tends to mean that you'll break down into some sort of open format of data, hopefully not files, hopefully not like file storage still, but hopefully in a data format that is open and available, and you don't have to worry about that kind of management of data moving forward.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions about other integrations, which we can sit here and do this all day, but I'm just going to do a general answer to all of this, is that the integrations that are out of the box for 3D Repo, and I'm sure with Asite, are available on the website, but anything is possible, right? If anything has an open API, which we do, and Asite does, is available to their clients, you can do an integration, or you can come to us and we can work with you to do that integration with any product, as long as that product you're talking about has an API. Some are easier to work with than the others, and some vendors make them openly available to their clients and some don't, is my answer. I won't go into individual ones. There is a specific one about Power BI, which I believe both of us have some sort of integration with, but Matt will talk a bit about that later in his presentation maybe as well. Okay, so let's anything else. Yeah, we've covered a lot about the. Yeah, what about the cost of having multiple softwares as opposed to one big package, Rob? How do you see that?
Well, this is an interesting one. I mean, I sound like I'm Autodesk bashing at the moment. Obviously, there's been significant in the market talk about the drive that once you're locked into one singular system, and you're heavily reliant on it, it becomes very, very easy for price increases and very, very difficult for you to be able to, basically go against that. It becomes quite a challenging environment for you as a business because you become dependent on that software. So even though the individual costs of subscriptions may, occasionally go over like one singular bigger package, it gives you far more flexibility. And as we've also talked about, it gives you way more functionality. Again, I'm going to take something simple like the phone approach. Like you have a phone and you pay a subscription to the phone, but you still pay a subscription to specialist softwares that do really good things, whether it be Strava for my fitness, whether it be Push Bullet, which is a tool that allows me to connect my phone to my PC, whether it be, and of course they're all escaping my memory now, I have multiple subscriptions. But my point is that if you have them individually, it's easier for you to turn different ones on and off as you require. Whereas if you have one, cumbersome license that's covering everything, you become really dependent on that, and it becomes very, very difficult for you to ever approach or negotiate or be able to manage any price increases. So for me, I think while the individual costs will, to be honest, probably more often than not, sum to more than a singular license, the functionality increase that you get is huge. So I think you get a return on investment right there. And then the flexibility that you have to move with the newest technologies continually also gives you an edge certainly within the AEC space that shouldn't be underestimated. And I think that's what you see from the most innovative organizations within this space, and it would be important for any company in my mind to consider that.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, I think we'll leave it there. Any more questions for Rob, do keep them coming, and we'll come back to him at the end for the longer discussion. But for now, I think we're going to hand over to Matt. So Matt's going to do a really interesting presentation now on doing a bit of a live demo of how we do an integration. So over to you, Matt.
Hi, everyone. Am I presenting okay, Andrew?
Yeah, looks good to me.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so if anyone noticed the slight nervousness in Rob's voice when he was waiting for that file to process, you're about to hear a lot more nervousness from me as I do a lot of stuff live, which may or may not work, but hopefully it will. So what I want to focus on today is to do with tinkering, it's to do with integration, and it's to do with progressing the industry in terms of technology. For anyone that knows Dynamo, that started out as a tinkering project, and then that's grown into sort of this big beast of a computational design program. And what we need to start seeing is using these APIs that the other guys have talked about, more of this tinkering, more of this sort of hobbyist, more of this sort of quick fixes that just get us out of this Excel problem that we seem to be in at the minute. So I'm going to run through one of these sort of problems and solutions today. So first of all, I want to talk about integration tools. These are cloud tools. They work a little bit like the internal tool that Rob was showing you in Asite, but they're external and they can start to talk to lots of different tools. So you've got ones like Power Automate from Microsoft, MuleSoft, and then a tool called Node-RED, which you might have seen in some 3D repo demonstrations before. For this presentation, I'm going to focus on Power Automate, the Microsoft platform. The reason being, you can go up today, sign up for a free account. I think you get something like 2,000 operations that you can run through. So you can start sending data from platform A to platform B completely free with all these plugins. So what's great about Microsoft Flow, Power Automate, there's a recent name change. So if I refer to it as Flow, that's just the old habit, is that they've got a lot of pre-built connectors. So they've taken the APIs of all these platforms. So for instance, you've got box.com here, Facebook, Google Drive, Google Sheets, and they've taken that logic that says, when I create a new row in Google Sheets, do something, and they've packaged it up into these little connectors. And then those connectors can then talk to each other. So I upload a file in Dropbox, that file goes to SharePoint. I make a post in Facebook, that post gets mirrored on Twitter. And then what's really interesting is we've taken the 3D repo APIs, which if you went on our website and looked them up on our website, you might find them, if you were a hobbyist or introducing yourself to these systems, a little bit daunting. We've taken a 3D repo API and we've added it into these tools of connectors so that we can start connecting to other platforms. And that really starts to get you to think, okay, well, what if I upload a document to Dropbox and then it gets mirrored into 3D repo? What if I create an issue in 3D repo and then I want to sync those issues to Google Sheets? The next thing I want to talk about today, and I'm going to demonstrate, is the tools to do with user interfaces around. Sometimes these platforms can talk to each other and that's great, but sometimes you need those extra bits of connectivity which let the user add extra data. And some of these passive connections don't always let you do that. So I wanted to look at how we can start to add data and enrich these data sets using APIs. So again, a few tools here, ranging in complexity. If you went with Jotform, it's literally drag and drop. I want a field in here, I want a barcode scanner, I want someone to take a picture, and then I want that information to get sent to wherever. But for today, we're going to be looking at Power Apps because that offers the greatest flexibility for us today. So Power Apps is essentially just an app building tool that you can build your enterprise apps on your Microsoft tenant and connect in all your data from everywhere. You can look at Excel spreadsheets that you've got stored online. You can look at Bing Maps if you want to, and any other number of platforms. And then, of course, the final bit of software that we'll be using is 3D Repo, which Andrew mentioned earlier, is this sort of AEC construction 3D model hub. And we're going to look at how we can enrich that concept with some of these other tools. So with that, I am going to switch over and hopefully pick the right browser. So I'm going to start off with this structural steel model that I've got, and we're using this as part of the demonstrator for the AEC production control room that we're doing with Mason, Evifile, and Mission Room. And then very quickly, if I just go to Power Apps, I've built this barcode scanning tool that will let me scan barcodes of things that exist on site and then push that data into 3D Repo as a quality control check, and I can trigger some of the workflows that are in 3D Repo. Now, it's quite easy. If I wanted to add another input in here, I can just say, okay, well, I want a date picker in here, and I can drop that in there. That then gives me the functionality to pick a date. Here, I've imported the requirements from 3D Repo's assignee list, and then anything I do here I can automatically save and publish, and then almost instantly, if I go to my phone, okay, well, my phone doesn't want to work today, so what we have is the ability to if I go back and demonstrate, basically create a live app almost instantly. And then I've done another one here, which is for Safety Base, our health and safety tool. And I've basically taken all of those tables from 3D Repo, things to do with risk likelihood, risk consequence, owners, categories, and so on and so forth. I've added an image in, and I'm allowing people to fill that data in on their phone, so maybe while they're out of sight. And something to bear in mind, these apps took maybe about half an hour to sort of architect and structure. And again, you can do this with a standard Office 365 license. And then I step into Microsoft Flow, which is where all those connectors live. And I can go into my connectors And I can say, okay, well, when someone submits that form in Power Apps, if they've scanned a barcode of an item, go ahead and create a group around that item. So basically tag that item up in 3D Repo and then create a new issue. And what I can do with the issue, like I mentioned, we've taken those complex and maybe daunting 3D Repo API documentation, and we've converted it into a nice easy form. So I can start to say, okay, well, I want the name to be taken from Power Apps. I want that to be taken from there. The topic type, however, is because of the nature of the form, I just want to call it a QA topic. Likewise, with the safety-based flow, what I've done is created a risk. So all the same information, we're coming in and we're taking that data and we're pushing it into 3D Repo. And then down at the bottom here, the other really cool thing about APIs is that it's not a linear flow. It is not a case of do something here happens. Doing something here could actually trigger a ripple effect across multiple platforms. So maybe the images get uploaded to your image platform. Maybe a document attachment gets uploaded to Asite, and maybe the issue then goes into 3D Repo. So what I've done here is added a condition that says, if both the risk likelihood and the risk consequence are 4 out of 4, so basically the most extreme, very high, and someone's recording that on site, realistically, putting that into a risk register is not the ideal output because it's still very passive. We're not really alerting people. So what I've done is I've created a bot in Teams that then sends a summary of that issue, of that risk, to a Teams channel, so that we can make sure that if something is risky, people get notified straight away. And all I have to do to add something else into here is simply, let's say I wanted it to be an SMS instead. I could search SMS. I can find the relevant connector. You know, you can look here. There's probably 8 or 9 vendors that are offering SMS text messaging, all for various different pricing. And I can simply add one in, fill in my details to do with my connection and my subscription, and then start to populate that. Likewise, if I come down here, I could also take this data and populate a SharePoint list. So I could create an item in SharePoint, and then over here, we have our custom connector, which is the 3D Repo connector. And this is all the things you can do in 3D Repo. So you can create a group, a smart group, like Bogdan has been showing in some of our previous demonstrations, or a risk, or you can even upload models. So if a model gets uploaded to Dropbox, push it into 3D Repo. Now, I'm just going to give my phone one last try so I can do the actual demonstration. 1 second.
Just while you're doing that, I'll also just jump in to mention there's a similar connector for Asite in available as well. So you'll be able to, essentially, you've got 2 different ways you can actually do the integration now. So you could do it through Flow or through our scripting. So it's similar from our side. And I filled space for you to get that working.
Yeah, thanks. I think you talking maybe got it to work, so I'm more than grateful of that. So okay, so up on my phone now. Should be able to see my phone, and then I've got those safety based and those QA apps here, so I can go into that QA app. And then here at the top, you can see that the latest version of the app was available because I updated it to include that date. And now when I go to it, the date picker is there. And if I go back, I've got my safety base on here. So let me just demonstrate the QA checker quickly. So again, built this half an hour, linked it all up, create the issue. So what we're going to do is I'm going to type a title for my issue to just say slab complete. Sorry, I was typing in the wrong tab there. Slab complete. Done. And then I'm just going to scan a barcode that I've got associated on this other computer with that slab. So let's say these QR codes were installed on the computers. I can then assign it to the main contractor, and I'm going to assign it as medium. And then if I open up 3D Repo over here, as soon as I submit this, you can see that the slab complete issue is there, and it's selecting the slab according to the QR code that I scanned. So now we've got an integrated data set. And then if I take that one step further and go back to my safety base app, if I come in here and I just start typing in my information, and apologies, I'm not going to type anything because I'm a bit rushed for time now. And let's say I do that. I do raise the risk likelihood and the risk consequence up, and then I assign it to the project manager. It is a safety issue, and let's say it's handling. I can populate these different features here. And then finally, what we can do with this app is we can add an image. So I'm going to come over here, select my camera, take a picture of this little truck that I've got here. Okay, that. And then I'm going to submit that off. And now you can see in 3D Repo, we've got the safety-based risk with the photo attached, with all the details that I entered. We've got a very high risk setting. And if I jump over to Teams, hopefully, I should have got a Teams message, a risk alert to say, yep, there's a new risk raised, my misspelling of hello and demo. So my whole team could then see that immediately. And we could even add a link into 3D Repo and also integrate that image into there. And then if I go back to 3D Repo, I can now start to use the 3D Repo tools to say, okay, well, I'm going to add a pin now that I'm back in the office and say this occurred over here. And I'm going to save that. And then I am going to add a comment and say, someone take a look quick. So that's the sort of long and the short of it. I know we're a bit tight for time, so I won't go on any further, and I'll sort of open it up to any questions that anyone might have, because I think we can explain some more detail out through that.
Wow, well done, Matt. That's brilliant. Yeah, so get the questions coming in. We'll have a bit more of an open discussion as well. So if there are questions from earlier presentations or anything, just get them in as well, and we'll go from there. There are a few that have come in. You mentioned other platforms as opposed to Power Automate. Are there any others that you'd recommend people look at, Matt? And is there anything that's a bit more on the enterprise? Is this enterprise level solution, you'd say, or where does it fit?
Yeah, so Microsoft has its own version of Power Apps that runs on Azure, which is the kind of more enterprise level, but it still uses all the same connectors. And then there's a lot of other platforms out there. Boomi, for instance, is much more enterprise driven. But what we're finding is that we get a lot of people on the ground that come to talk to us and say, we love this fact that you can integrate with this platform and this platform, but if we go to our IT department, it's going to take a long time to spin those things up. And how do I quickly, how do I escape this spreadsheet hell that I'm living in at the minute and start to move towards better data management? And so these sorts of tools really help with that.
I think it was really interesting, also just to jump in, I mean, it's really interesting there, just how we've emphasised, or I hope, it came across to me, having not seen that, emphasised the point of the benefit of having these connectors and being able to very quickly set something up using multiple different tools to deliver something that you couldn't do in one tool. It's not there. So hopefully it comes across the audience as well. And as I said, I haven't seen that particular run through you've just done there, but it came across really clearly the value of this stuff to the industry, I think.
Yeah, I think we're receiving a lot of kind of requests for information at the moment from clients who are looking for these all-encompassing solutions almost, and it feels like it's just a wish list of everything. And there isn't a platform out there that does everything that people are asking for. But what I think we're trying to say as a company, I think Asite as well, is that it's not about finding that one platform, and you need to be able to, or be prepared to put the time in to invest and create these custom little apps to be able to get these very specific use cases that you want. And I think what we're showing here is that it is possible on a level that isn't going into the millions of pounds worth of investment to do it like it might have been in the past.
Yeah, quite right there, Andrew. I think in the past, I don't know, in the industry, what I've discovered is frequently people would put requests on projects, and then they would potentially, invest a lot of money and time into a specific workflow, and then they would realize, oh, it's not actually quite as suitable, but they stick to it because they've heavily invested into it. That's not really efficient. I think what nice to see here is that you can prototype some workflows and then see whether they're actually, beneficial. If you see a real value, then you can add more value to it by further developing it as well. Yeah,
and I think that's a really interesting point to to build off of both Rob and Bogdan there, is that you will hit a ceiling with whatever software you buy, and whatever your requirements are today, in 6 months' time they may change. And so going out and buying a piece of software according to a very rigid checklist may lead you down the path of then being stuck later on. So what we want to be able to do is say, and you know, it's happened before where people have come to us with these integrations and we've got, oh, that's good, we're going to actually build that into the platform because that's a good idea. And Safety Base is a perfect example of that. It's grown from a kind of a working team of people that wanted to improve something about the industry, and we've worked to integrate with several different platforms to do that.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting question here about how do you decide which tools to use then, and yeah, does anyone have any thoughts on that? I mean, my one is that the first thing I'd always look for is something that has an open API that gives me that flexibility to be able to do something. But how would we advise people to go around looking for these tools and evaluating them?
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
No, you go, Rob. You go.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. For me, I always really want to define the problem that I've got rather than, and if you define the problem that you've got, and the more specific, the easier it becomes, then it's easier to look for a tool that solves that specific problem. If you just look for solutions first and then see, you know, generally what's out there for safety, and you're basically too general in your search, the chance that you find what you want is low. So I always kind of essentially work backwards. What's the problem and how do I actually want it to execute? And this goes for, you know, whether it be Asite, 3D Repo, or you know, personally, I want my phone to be able to copy a phone number from my phone, from my email and my laptop, and paste that on my phone. So I need a tool that can do that. So I think you've got to make your problem statement really defined. And then, to be honest with you, you know, the likes of Google are pretty surprisingly good at digging out the right kind of fit for that. But as I said, and as with any search, the more specific you are with your problem statement, the better you are in terms of getting a solution. That was a bit of a general answer, a bit of waffle, but I don't know, Matt, if you wanted to add to that. That would be my approach.
So there is actually an excellent platform called Unisu, which gathers up a bunch of different software that's maybe a bit more independent. So the stuff that you might not come across as readily on LinkedIn or something like that, but sometimes they're solving really interesting problems, back to Rob's earlier diagram. I think the other interesting thing that we haven't really touched upon is one of the critical needs for integration in the construction industry is that the nature of the supply chain and the relationship with the client means that often the client will come to a project and say, I want to use this project controls tool, or I want to use this CDE. You as a business may have structured your business around using an alternative project controls tool or CDE, and you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater every time you start a new project and lose all of that business intelligence, all of that lean, all of that sort of productivity gain that makes you the company that you are. So by having these integrations, you could say, okay, client, okay, subcontractor, subcontractor, you bring what you want to the table, I'll bring what I want to the table, and we'll just plug them all in together and make them work.
Yeah, I think there's something, it's a good point, and I think it's something else around the future as well, right? Because you've got a problem you need to solve today, but I think you've got to look about what happens when that problem changes or a new problem occurs, right? You've got two options. One, can I adapt this solution to be able to do something else in the future if I need it to? Or two, worst case scenario, is it going to be easy for me to move away from the solution to another one if I need to? Because in reality, you don't want to be locked into something for forever, because what's good today may not be the right solution tomorrow. Would be my kind of final point on that.
Yeah, and just to extend that, I mean, the other interesting thing is we're a great industry for investing in things just to plug a hole temporarily. I mean, the number of times I've seen where an API or connector would be useful that requires small investment to get it set up. Let's say they don't have an API, or they don't have an open API, or they don't have an open connector, and you know the setting up of that is X pounds. The number of times I then see X pounds per year spent on a person to do that job, which over the life cycle of that singular project culminates in 5 times the cost, is amazing. And I think it's no surprise to anybody that, you know, construction is the least digitized industry going, you know, less than agriculture. So I think as an industry, we need to concentrate on these things and understand that actually investment into technology and solutions and connectors is going to give us a return and make things more efficient. And whether there's not a belief there that that's the case at the moment, or there's not enough people with that belief, remains to be seen. But that in my opinion is also really important, that we change this mindset of, oh, we'll just get someone to do that job to plug the gap because the cost for this year is the same, but we don't see the 5-year cost, or the cost that you know, you're having to do that on 15 different projects. Whereas if I did the connection once, then it's executable for all of those instances for the same investment, if you like.
Yeah, I'm aware we're running a bit over the time that we originally said, but I think the conversation's going well. So I just want to remind everyone, there's been a few questions about it, that this is being recorded. So if you want to come back to it later, please do. But we'll keep going through the questions if everyone on the panel's all right to stick about for a bit longer.
Yep.
So Matt, there's a very good point here. Where do people get the Power Automate connector? Because I don't think it's actually published at the moment. Same for Asite, Rob. Is it something that's available, or?
From our side, I'll have to check. It should be in. I'll check. It should be within the Microsoft Store. It will be there soon if it's not already. Again, it's quite fresh, so it should be there. But if it's not, you know, we'll send out notification. If you follow us on our LinkedIn, we'll send out notification when it's there.
Yeah, and likewise, ours is currently going through the vetting process at Microsoft, but we can share the version that I use today with people if anyone wants to get cracking and play.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Yeah, so if we have anyone who on here is willing to beta test and wants to have a play with it, please do drop us an email, support@3drepo.com, and we'll get that sent out to you. Have we considered FME from Safe Software and creating a connector for them? I suppose it's more aimed at Matt, I guess.
Yeah, so we could do. We don't really see that much FME usage, although I guess being design focused, we probably should see. I would have expected to see more, but so far we haven't actually had anyone come to us and say they use FME. But I would love to. I think it's a very powerful bit of powerful product. I think that it's a little bit cost prohibitive. So the question would be whether there's a market for it. But no, more than, if anyone's using FME and wants to get in touch about a connector, more than happy to help.
Yeah, that's an anonymous question, but yeah, if you do want to get in touch, let us know. Okay, just a few more on the apps that you created, Matt. Is it possible to make anything more complex than that?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to extreme depths with this. I mean, I just built those. The goal, and something I didn't mention actually, was that anyone on 3D Repo now, which was the Microsoft tenant I built that on, can now use that app from the moment I built it. But you can get more complex, but obviously more complex equals a little bit more time, but more familiarity breeds more complexity and more capability. And earlier in my slides, I showed some other tools, things like Retool is slightly better at managing larger sets of data and doing some more custom integrations. So there's a tool for everyone, all the way down from Zapier at the one end, which is very, very consumer focused, up to more complex stuff further down the line.
Yeah, and what about getting could the 3D viewer actually be used, like the 3D Repo viewing stuff be used within an app?
So that's something we're looking at. It's something you could certainly do yourself if you had internal development resource that could build, quick little apps using JavaScript and HTML. You can certainly do it, and we've done collaborations with Cogitol and OpenText and Evifile that do those sorts of things. But yeah, it's definitely something we're interested in.
And something else that came up earlier, what about the 3D viewer within Power BI?
Yeah, so we are, I know we spoke about that maybe last time. We are bringing in a little bit more complexity into that, hopefully in the near future. It just depends on some of the interfacing with Power BI, but hopefully we want to be at a point where we can visualize 3D models in Power BI with your data, be it in 3D Repo, from other sources, Internet of Things connectors, or even in the case of Asite, you saw from Rob's demo, there was loads of metadata attached to those documents. And in 3D Repo, we don't necessarily hold all of that. So maybe Power BI is a very nice way where we can take what we have and what Asite has, bring them together so that you get a combined view all in the same place.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've come to the end of the questions. If anyone has any last questions, please do get them in now. If not, just a reminder that the presentations will go out probably towards the end of today once it's all been processed as a video. But apart from that, thanks very much for joining us. Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks very much, guys. Rob, thank you very much for joining us on this. It was a brilliant presentation. We really appreciate your help. And yeah, if anyone is interested, either through the existing 3D Repo or Asite, or ideally both clients that are on the call, interested in getting set up with the integration, please let me or Rob know. I'm sure we can help out, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks, Bogdan. Thanks, Matt. And I'll speak to you all later.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.